The result was the charming piano quartet called The Trout, because it uses the theme from the song of that name, Die Forelle. Holidays with Vogel became almost a regular affair in Schubert's life. Gmunden was another town they visited, and Schubert particularly enjoyed walks in the surrounding countryside. At Gmunden they stayed with a family who had a house on the lake. On these trips, Vogel and Schubert, of course, gave recitals of his songs. Schubert went twice with his friend Schubert to a family home at Atzenbruck. There were endless parties with the friends, dancing for which Schubert had to play his waltzes, and eating and drinking to all hours. Amongst the new friends was the artist Kupelwieser, who brilliantly recorded events. This drawing shows the bespectacled Schubert watching an excursion party set off. If ever there was a representation of the Romantic age, this is it. In this lovely watercolor, Schubert is at the piano and the artist himself sits behind it. The rest of the group are involved in party games. This is a game of ball, also at Atzenbruck Castle. The landscape was done by the ever-talented Schubert, and the figures put in by another artist friend, Schwindt. Schubert smokes a long pipe. The handsome Moritz von Schwindt was only 18 when he joined the Schubert circle. He could compose almost as well as he could paint. He went on to draw Schubert and his friends frequently, and in later years became one of Germany's greatest painters. Kupelwieser painted and drew Schubert also, and this sketch was done in 1821 when Schubert was 23. Schwindt did this drawing of a typical Schubert evening, or Schubertiad as they were called in 1868, long after the composer's death. Vogel is about to sing, and Schubert is of course at the keyboard. All the other friends are portrayed here, the ever-faithful Sporn, Schober, Schwindt himself, and on the wall, Countess Caroline Esterhazy. In 1824, Schubert returned to Hungary to teach the Esterhazy girls, and Countess Caroline was 19 and very pretty. It is thought that this time he fell in love with her. Certainly he dedicated a beautiful piano duet to her. By this time he knew he had the fatal disease syphilis, and he knew therefore that marriage could not be for him, quite apart from the social divide that separated him from a countess. His friends paid to have his first works engraved, and they were sold at the shop of the music publisher Anton Diabelli, one of the most important Viennese publishers. This brought Schubert much needed income, and Diabelli and others began to publish his songs and other works. Generally, however, Schubert was useless at organizing his finances, and indeed most other aspects of living. Schubert contrived to live in his own unique and irregular style for the rest of his days. After a late arising came a morning's intense composition. In the late afternoon he'd take a stroll with some friends over to Grinzing or some other leafy suburb, where they would linger over a glass of wine. In the evening after supper and a Schubertiad at someone's house, they would go on to a coffee shop like the King of Hungary and talk and laugh until well past midnight. In the winter of 1827, Schubert began one of his greatest works, the song cycle Die Winterreise, or The Winter's Journey. It was based on the poems of Robert Müller, not so stunning on their own, but when set by Schubert into this glorious group of songs, the whole becomes quite magical. He had been living since March of this year in the Schober's new lodging in the Tachlauben. Here he had spacious accommodation, 2 rooms and a music closet. This was to be his base for the rest of his life. This building is all that remains of the period. Typically, Schubert invited everyone for a housewarming party, forgot all about it and didn't appear. On 26th March, Beethoven died. They had met only once, but Schubert was nervous on the occasion, and they never met again. Beethoven was astounded by the quality of Schubert's songs, and Schubert had dedicated a piano duet to him. Schubert was one of 36 torchbearers at the funeral. Gradually his works were published and concerts were given, but in the eyes of the public he was a songwriter and therefore not serious. When he got serious, no one could understand his music. Above all, he was quite unprepossessing in appearance, and although he played well, he was not a virtuoso pianist like Mozart or Beethoven. Could he possibly be a success? It was all disheartening. On a holiday trip to Graz with a friend, however, they stayed at the home of Marie Pachler. The Pachler family were accomplished musicians and held frequent Schubertiades. They were a typical part of the network of friends drawn together by Schubert's music and his unique personality, which was perhaps the most remarkable thing about his life. Worldly success he may not have had, but he was never without friends who valued and understood him. In 1828 he was incredibly busy. He wrote the great C major symphony and the string quartet in C major, and he had already written the unfinished symphony, which was to command worldwide popularity. His chamber works were performed by the best quartet in Vienna, led by Ignaz Schuppanzich, longtime exponent of Beethoven. It couldn't be said that Schubert lacked encouragement from the best quarters. But popular success, such as his works enjoy today, he did not have. In 1828 he began to feel the onset of the second stage of syphilis, headaches, giddiness and nausea. It was depressing. In spite of that, he wrote in this, the last year of his life, an astonishing number of works, including several religious works, which he hoped yet again would gain him public support. On the 1st of September 1828, Schubert left his apartment and went to stay with his brother Ferdinand in the suburb of Neu of Eden. He obviously meant to make only a short visit, for he left his manuscripts behind at Schober's. He was ill and felt the country air would help him. 2 months later, he was still there and not much better. Suddenly he was struck down with a new illness, typhoid fever, the illness which had killed his mother and which at this time was generally fatal. In his already weak condition, he did not last long and died on November 19th, aged not quite 32. In his brief life, Schubert wrote a phenomenal amount of beautiful music. We can regret that he never experienced the great recognition his work today enjoys, but no man was better loved and valued by his friends than Franz Peter Schubert, which is enough reward for anyone.